So we're just going to get started now. Thanks for coming. It's really good to see so many people here for a session around IT, right? We've seen that kind of change in the past few years with Tableau and the importance of IT being the enabler there. This is my colleague Vinod.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking the time today to come to our talk. Building, deploying, governing, and working it, like IT, right? I'm a solutions architect in the professional services org based out of Palo Alto office. I've been in the business intelligence field about 15 years with a deep background in ETL, data warehousing, reporting, and strategic implementations of an end-to-end BI practice, right? A little bit about me, born and bred in Singapore, dad of one human and two very talkative huskies.
Cool. I'm a principal architect. My name is Emiliano. As Vinod, I've been in the BI world for about 15 years. I've done the whole database developer thing, the report developer. Then I joined Tableau about 2012 in our London office, and I actually relocated here from London to the Palo Alto office about a year ago. I'm originally from Italy, as you can probably tell by my name. And throughout my travels, throughout the years, I've grown one more passion other than Tableau. And that is a passion that's taken me throughout these years, and that is my passion for the Philadelphia Eagles. Yes! Woohoo! Awesome. I was hoping to get someone, or some booze or something. Thank you. So I actually hope that you walk out of this session just like that. It will be really great. Just, yes, Super Bowl champions. Moving on.
Yeah. So, before we proceed, right, we ask that you put your phones in silent mode if possible, and hold all your questions till the end of the presentation. I promise we'll make sure that you have enough time to ask those questions. And if you don't get to catch us or you don't have enough time, you're running off to another presentation, we have a Tableau speaking work group on Thursday between 12:15 and 1:30 p.m. So there's always plenty of time for questions. So please, if possible, keep it till the end.
Cool. And a word of caution before we start. We're going to show some real-world examples of things that we've done with customers, right? Hopefully you guys can take away. So there's going to be some demos. Hopefully there's no glitches, but we've practiced many times. That should be okay. But we just wanted to warn you, there's some cool things coming ahead that hopefully you guys can take away and implement today once you leave. And before we get started, I've got a clicker. Before we get started, I have a question for you all, right? And I think sometimes this question comes up, especially in the IT world, is why self-service? Why are we trying to achieve self-service, right? Why are most companies going through a lot of changes in the companies to really try to achieve this self-service at scale? And I'll start with a quote from Stephen Hittle. He's the VP and BI Innovation Leader at JPMorgan Chase. And he says, I would rather create a platform that allows the business to solve their own problems because we, IT, never know them all. And I think that really sums it up quite nicely, right? It's really, how can IT be the enabler of what the business is doing already and make them do it faster, easier, better, more securely, and at scale? And I think we can all agree on some of the key benefits that self-service brings, right? Both from the business perspective and on the IT side. If you think from the business side, you look at easier access to data, especially minimizing dependencies and bottlenecks caused by other teams, right? It is about providing data-driven decisions to their teams and being able to leverage the business knowledge and the data knowledge that they already have in those teams. From an IT perspective, think of it as us getting out of the report building world, or something that we're always providing reports to the business and really focusing on what IT does best, which is to really scale and provide services that service to the business. And I have a question for you guys. How many of you have seen or implemented a Tableau Server, self-service Tableau Server that looks like this? Awesome, great. So, there's clear definition. Everybody's smiling and happy. The food's great. The content is great. Everything's laid out nicely and perfectly. But how many of you feel like it's more like this? All right. And the reality sometimes that it does turn into this, right? Chaotic, people fighting over things, right? People beating each other up, all this kind of stuff. And like I said, I just moved here about a year ago from London, and I went to Black Friday for my first time, and it was, man, it was interesting. I'm looking forward to the next one. Not really. So what we're going to tell you guys today is how do we make sure, how can you guys, the IT guys, how can you guys be the enablers of making sure that self-service does not turn into chaos, that doesn't look like a Black Friday stampede. And I heard it was pretty crazy with the certifications. There was a bit of a stampede getting those certifications yesterday. And we're going to show you some real examples that we've actually implemented and are running today with a lot of our customers. Right? And it's all based on the IT guys setting that up correctly.
Thanks, Emiliano. The goal today, basically, is to help you successfully deploy a self-service analytics environment at scale and get out of that chaos. To become more of an enabler, empowering your organization, leveraging your investment in Tableau, and making your users more self-sufficient, right? And do the things that they excel at and be truly data-driven. A structured framework for success that is both technical and strategic that has been proven to be successful time and again. Some of which will be kind of common sense. You might already know this, but it's good to reiterate. And this framework, we want to show you that it supports Tableau at scale. We're not talking about small instances. You're talking about where we are now, where we're going to be in 2 years, where we're going to be in the next 5 years. Something that scales. And also, the solutions that we propose is to make IT an enabler, not a bottleneck. We've all been there. We've been pretty much blamed for a lot of the bottlenecks. But this time, we want to show you how to be really an enabler to the business org. So what is this framework? Right? The framework is made up of 3 pillars of excellence: people, process, platform. Right? To go into it a little deeper, right? Classically, the relationship between IT and the rest of the org is based on support cases and on a reporting assembly line mechanism. But IT can play a better role, a more crucial role. Right? To break it down, under people, you see it's strategy, education, support, and community. What is strategy? Assess your maturity and build a roadmap. Understand where you are today and where you want to be. And when you know it, get the key players to the table to make things happen. Everybody would want a seat at the table, but you got to get the key guys. Define roles and responsibilities, and make sure they know what they are accountable for. Right? That's part of your strategy. Increase your user adoption and enable rapid speed to insights by providing continuous education. Just because we rolled out a Tableau server doesn't mean everyone else knows how to use it. There will always be continuous people onboarding and leaving and needing continuous training with the upgrades that we keep coming up with the new innovation that you might come up with. So something as simple as being onboarded, providing something more advanced like structured Tableau training on advanced calculations, visualization best practices, even performance tuning. You can do all this via Tableau doctor sessions, or you can call one of your Tableau sales reps. They'll hook you up. Right? Build a sense of community. Spread the analytics culture, organizing Tableau user groups so that they don't always rely on you for everything. You don't want to get an email, hey, how do you do this? How do you do this? If you have a Slack site, if you have a group where they can just post a question, another developer in another org, he might know the answer. You don't always have to know it all. Right? You might want to have Tableau days, show or tell, tips and tricks, newsletters. That has been a favorite, and I found it very successful at being implemented at several client sites. Coming to process, governance, right? Data governance and workflow governance. It reduces any confusion on who does what, when you're doing it, and how you're doing it. Now, the thought process is you don't want to make it overly cumbersome. If it's too bureaucratic, nobody wants to follow it. Your dev becomes your default prod. So you want to make sure governance is kind of well balanced, not too hard, not too easy, but making sure the main points are all checked. Security. Who needs to access the service? Who needs to access the content? Who needs to access the data? What we call row-level security, column-level security, things like that. If you have all those tenets as part of your security, you kind of know how to deal with pretty much any situation, any user who want to publish some kind of content on your server. Automation, we'll go into that a little bit later. I think Emiliano's got a whole bunch of stuff. In terms of platform, infrastructure, architect and design all components you will leverage and the expected interaction between them, both current state and future state. We've seen all these diagrams with this is where your server is, this is where your Tableau server is, this is where your database is. How many of you actually put interactions? What kind of throughput you're getting? How many times the server is going to get hit? Is it going to be a live connection? Is it going to be an extract? Right? Are we going to get 200 users looking at the same dashboard at once and the database is just going to get hit all of a sudden? Those kind of things need to go into your platform architecture and design. Based on that, that's how you would predict size and scale. Right? Don't forget to include little things. Upgrade management, usage performance monitoring. Yes, we have seen the diagrams. Has anybody seen a diagram on how are we going to monitor what's actually happening across the system? Who's taking a pulse on the system? Right? Data. Map your data ecosystem. Consider your source of data, its data definitions, and exposed data sources. We have a whole bunch of data sources, but only select few are exposed to the general public. You want to know how it's defined, who's using it, build out data dictionaries with certified definitions, provide a high level of confidence that the users, when they use this data, that it's going to reconcile with someone else's report somewhere else. Right?
Cool. Thanks, Vinod, for that intro. So we're part of the professional services team. So we are post-sales consultants. And we, again, like Vinod said, we go in with customers to help them really scale out from a strategic piece and a technological piece, Tableau inside of companies. So that's our day-to-day job. So we use that framework quite often with most of our customers. And what I wanted to do now is to look at those different slices of that framework and see what you guys or IT can do today on each of those slices. Just a few things. So, yeah, right? Start a Jedi Tableau Council, whatever you might want to call it, but start a council. Council is a way to discuss kind of your strategy, where you're heading. Kind of think back to what Vinod was saying about people, about getting the buy-in from the key stakeholders. They should sit at this council. Your users should sit at this council, or representatives of those users should sit at that council. Our most successful customers have councils, which, like I said, have stakeholders, have IT representatives. And in this council, which should happen probably once or twice per month, issues are discussed. Governance is discussed. Upgrade cadence is discussed. New innovations. What do we do about all these workbooks that are getting overloaded in my system, and my users, business users might say, I don't know what to do. There's so much stuff here. How do we solve that? We come together during this council, we make those decisions together to get everyone on the same page and execute them. Okay? Number 2, provide to your content owners self-service content analytics. Okay? Now, by default, all this data around usage is inside the repository. So who's built admin views against the repository? Cool, it's good. So what we want to do here is we want to provide to our content owners, so people that are creating dashboards, people that are creating data sources, we want to actually liberate that data and provide it to them, right? So maybe you might have a particular project on your server called whatever, my Tableau or something like that, where you can host these dashboards, and I'll show you an example. Where a particular user can maybe go and find his username right here, select a particular username, his username or someone that reports to him, and see, right, I own 24 workbooks, I own 6 published data sources, where those published data sources are located in a particular project or on a particular server, right? Which objects they are, but most importantly, what we have found is why don't you attach and make this available to users usage stats. So I actually have all this content, but who's using it? Who's viewing it? Is it successful in my rollout? And you can actually enhance this data with, maybe your own internal data with not just usernames, but also what roles they're in. Right? It would be great for the content owners to know who's using their dashboards. Is it effective? Is it getting rolled? Is it scaling up? Is there actually any usage? And who are my consumers? Now, this is data that you have. Again, it's all in the Postgres. And all we're saying is just liberate that data and make it available for self-service. We're partnering up with the business. They're asking for self-service. We should also help them achieve that self-service, right? So liberate that data. And what the benefits that we get, again, is self-reliance, self-service from the business, but also maybe less support calls going in to us, to the IT org, saying, I want to know who's consuming my stuff. Can you give me one view where I can see everything? Has anybody implemented something along these lines? Fantastic. Number 2 that we can do today, self-service schedule analytics. Right? In the Tableau world, publishers can schedule their own things. And sometimes it is a bit hard for them to figure out what they've scheduled, when they've scheduled it. Because again, this data is locked away by default inside our admin views. So again, only system admins and server admins can see this. You can make today, you can make a simple modification, get those admin views, start from that, add a filter on the owner of these schedules or who extracted them, and again, publish it into a project that is available for your content owners. They can go and see, when is my data ready? Was it delayed? Did it fail? Why did it fail? How many schedules do I have? Do I really need all those? Do I need to bump it up or bump it down? And again, this is just providing the service to your platform consumers or to your Tableau Server consumers, or content owners rather, to enable them to achieve that self-service. We're asking them to partner with us. Let's help them partner with us, right? Number 4, self-service permissions analytics. So everything from in the Tableau Server is driven by objects. So if you look at permissions, a user or content owner has to go to each single object and get an overview of those permissions objects by object. That's probably not a very scalable thing, right? Some content owners might have hundreds of workbooks. or a whole group has hundreds of workbooks. Provide some kind of data source, or sorry, dashboard, that allows them, again, to self-serve and know who is viewing my stuff, who's got access to my stuff, in an easier way than the default. Also, flip it around. So if we look at the permissions, the way we look at permissions, we only allow them to see them by object. So why don't we show it by user? So these users have access to these things, so like a summary view. Or these groups have access to these objects and to these data sources. Yeah? And again, this is very powerful, especially for if you're kind of pushing down the self-service to your project leaders where they're managing their own permissions. It becomes quite hard for them to manage all that. So again, if you're pushing that self-service down and the roles and responsibilities are lined up like that, make sure that they have the tools to be able to self-serve.
Process. Thanks, Emiliano. Moving into the process piece of it. To start off, structure. Everybody knows about the sandbox and the prod or the standardized area within Tableau. Or any IT or software project. You have a dev, QA, and a prod. What you see here is dev and prod, or sandbox and standard, exists on the same server, the production Tableau server. You don't have multiple instances, one server, one site, or multiple sites if you wish, but you host it all in one place. Right? In order to do that, let's see the definitions or the key attributes of a sandbox area. Right? In a sandbox area, everyone can read, everyone can write. It typically contains all kinds of objects, most with a short, useful lifespan. They will exist there forever, like icons on my desktop, right? They're pretty much there forever, but the useful lifespan is very short. It's one-off, quick prototyping, and then they forget about it, or just in case. We never know we might need it. Right? And then for your standardized, give me 1 second. For your standardized or production area, everyone can read, only few can write. Contains things like checked, validated, governed, approved, official contents. We all know this. We all probably have this. But how do you make it properly structured within your environment? Let's take a look. This is something that you can do with your Tableau server site or project structure today. Let's take a look. Did it come up? I present review. There you go. This is a live Tableau server. Most instances we've seen Tableau servers, they kind of look boring, just boxes on it with basic descriptions. This is how we suggest that you do a Tableau server. Right? Not just any old project, but structured in such a way that you have a place for admins, you have a place for my Tableau, content like what Emiliano was talking about. Everybody has access to the content that they had published. Who has permissions to my objects? What are my objects? When do they run? Things like that. Host it all in one place. Then you might want to have a viz of the day, something like that. Tableau samples, and the breakup of dev and QA and prod. If you look at this piece, certified global workbooks, this I would consider a prod instance. Everybody can read, only a few can write. Global data sources. This is an isolating project just for data sources. Again, a prod instance for data sources. Right? Everybody can read, only a few can write. Global self-service. Global self-service is where we call what we call a sandbox environment. Everybody can read, everybody can write, and they have access to the global data sources which they can pull into the system and build whatever they need, or pull in the certified workbooks into the environment and build whatever they need. And what we suggest is, make sure that you have a retention policy. Content in this folder is periodically purged. Please do not use this project to host. You don't want this project to become a de facto production environment. Right. So again, you probably know this. You can isolate the way each person looks at it. This, you can see, is an admin view. Someone from possibly, let's take a look and see who I have. Finance, what will they look, how will it look like for them? They don't get to see the admin views. They just get to see my Tableau, Viz of the day, samples if you so wish to publish it to them, and then your global sets, and then department-specific sets that are exposed only to that department. And within that department, they also have their data sources and their own self-service or workbooks environment. Let's go back here. Next piece, part of the process. You have a structure. Now you have to build out a content certification framework. You will leverage the Sandbox and the standard to segregate Sandbox content and certified content. You also have to define two key responsibilities. Requesters, everybody wants to get their stuff on the server. The certifier, he's going to act as a gating mechanism. Right? The requester can be anyone who creates content for ongoing global consumption, can be a person from business units or IT development, and they will actually own the end-to-end development and QA cycles. What they don't own is the production end of it. The certifier, typically a project leader. Prime function to provide guidelines to the requesters to follow. Enforce the guidelines. When they're pulling in the data, they're migrating from Sandbox to production, you have to meet certain criteria. Data criteria, technology criteria. Is it going to bring the server down to its knees? Is the security implemented correctly? Have you followed the best practices? So this is one crucial part of the framework where you get a clean, standardized production environment. Everybody can read, only a few can write. It also allows you to push that development cycle into your business units. As we grow, we know most of the business units are getting adept at building their own dashboards. You don't have to be sucked into doing the dashboard development. Once the whole process of deployment is done, they get a seal of approval. Right?
No. Okay.
And part of the process.
Cool. So Vinod talked about we have a structure that can hold a self-service or ad hoc Sandbox versus a standard one. So we've got the structure. We've got the process or the framework that tells us what is Sandbox and what is standard. How about we automate that process, right? Now, we've got some great stuff. I'm not sure how many of you guys use REST APIs or the Postgres, but we can do these things by coding them. Hopefully one day we have them inside of the product, but it doesn't mean you cannot do them today. Yeah? And I'll show you guys a demo. The use case here is we have an internal-facing server, let's say, and we have an external-facing server that is for our external customers. And no one's allowed to publish on the external server. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our self-service BI users create dashboards, publish them into a certain place onto the internal server, and that gets automatically synced and pushed with the approvals of the certifiers or the gatekeepers all the way to the external server automatically. I'll show a demo of that. So let's say I am the publisher. Open my Tableau desktop. Open one of my favorite workbooks. Have you guys ever seen this workbook? It's really cool. So I will publish this to my project. So I've been told by a project leader or by IT that I have a service that if I want to publish to an external server, I can just publish in a particular place.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. Publish to a particular place, which is here. Let me just log out real quick. So I've been told I need to publish in this particular project. Okay? So I'll publish in there. Oops. Perfect. So I'll publish into this particular project, and I will publish there. So I just want to show you that on my external server, there's nothing in there yet. Okay? These are two servers, so you can probably see from the URL, which I have an internal and external one. So what I'll do is the publisher, I'll publish in the internal one. And just think that this doesn't have to be internal or external. It's just a demo of how you can automate that promotion process. And now I call my project leader and I say, look, I need you to approve this content, please. So I'll log in as a project leader, or if you think of Vinod's framework, the certifier. I go to my workbook, I review it based on maybe a checklist that the certification framework has. Check if it's got the right data, if it's following company policy with the guide, since it's external facing, if it's showing the right colors or the right formats, etc. And then I can just go and say approved in the comments. And now, if I go to my internal server, it's going to pop up at some point. So there's actually a REST API, Python script, REST API, running in the background constantly that is looking for certain things. So it's looking for approved on particular workbooks in particular projects by particular people. And you can define all those rules based on what you agree maybe during that council. Right? Again, self-service. It doesn't have to necessarily go through IT. We're just enabling them to do self-service. So let me just refresh. And there it is. Right? That just went through with a REST API call. Now, you could extend this even a bit more and say, well, you know what? I don't want, if they want to delete it, no one's got access to the external server. I don't want them to log support calls, and there I'm a bottleneck again. Build that as part of your process too, your automation. So the same thing, I can go to my internal, and all I have to do as the publisher or the owner is just delete it. And that's on the internal server. And it'll take a couple of minutes. Refresh. I don't know how fast I can click refresh. Let's see. And it's gone. Right? So again, we're talking about self-service structure, projects, sites, however you prefer. We're talking about a framework to differentiate between ad hoc and certified. And we're talking about providing a service or a process to to automate that for our business users. Oh, that's going all the way up. So now let's talk about the final slice or pillar of that framework, right? So we talked about the people, we talked about the process, and we'll talk about the platform. And this is kind of the classic IT, right? So where IT gets involved the most, keeping the lights on, keeping that platform stable, keeping everything, working, really keeping the lights on. Now, as you've probably seen, is that with the self-service model, that becomes a bit difficult. There's a few things that makes that bit difficult for us. If you don't have a structure, people are just publishing things, right? If you don't have a hold of your schedules, schedules keep on piling up because anybody can just publish them against those schedules. So it does create some problems where sometimes when you're the server admin, you might feel like, this is fine, but not really. You've got fires around you, etc. What we want to get you to is something a bit more like this, where you can have your coffee in the morning and your Tableau Server is humming away and running perfectly. And we'll show some real examples that are actually working right now with many of our customers.
Right. So content cleanup. Earlier we were saying that Sandbox environment has a whole bunch of data, objects, data sources, workbooks. They just sit there and don't do anything. They just accumulate over time, and nobody wants to commit as to when can we delete it, who owns it, what should we do about it, right? So there is a content cleanup infrastructure that you can build, which is fully automated to do this. So let's take a look at the demo, right? This is one of those things that uses REST API calls to make this work. Okay. Oops. Give me 1 second. Going back into our server.
I'll show you the server.
Mm-hmm. This is where it's in my Tableau. Oh, gotcha. Okay. So now let me. I need to go to the website. Yep, the workbook. Sign out. Let's get in there as an admin. And so again, this is workbooks that you already have. Not that you already have. This is data that you already have within your Postgres repository. So something like, how do you find out unused workbooks? How do you find out unused data sources? When was the last time it was used? This is a live system that's running to show you what is existing in your server, right? You can find out how many of the workbooks that are the last used days. You can set a threshold. I put here as 20 days, where you want to warn somebody, or archiving threshold, where you say, okay, anything that's over 40 days old that hasn't been touched, we're going to archive it and change the permissions on it. So these are additional constructs and things that we can put in place. And this is the unused workbooks component. So let me see if I can do, let's call it 10. Oh, it's the archiving threshold. Okay. So what we are looking at, all that's warning and archiving, this will tell you who is going to get warned, looks like nobody, who is going to get archived, these many people. Right. This is for the workbooks. We have something similar for data sources. Unfortunately, we don't have any data sources that fulfills that criteria right now. We also have things that can specifically target particular projects within a site. So you have a whole bunch of sites. You don't want the thing to scan the entire site. You just want to scan 2 or 3 projects. You select those projects, and it will just go and get that project information for you. So this is one such project. We have hard-coded it for this demo purposes, a Sandbox workbooks project. So this is specifically targeted. And this is a view of all your archived content. You have archived it, put it in one place. This guy happened to be on a vacation for 3 months. He comes back screaming, bloody hell, I haven't touched it. What happened? Right? It's all in the archived content. For him, it might seem like it has been deleted. It actually went into a different folder altogether. So we can do a demo, but I think we're running a little bit short on time. Let me see if I can quickly set that up. All right. So
Well,
this,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Go.
So this dashboard, let's go into edit mode. And thresholds are all set dynamically within your dashboard, not some hard-coded script that you need to actually write. Of course, the implementation of the script will be invoked at a different level. So unused workbooks, let's take a look and see how many workbooks are we looking at. Warning threshold of 20, archiving at 40, let me see, 40, 80. I'm just going to make it 60, hit enter. Archiving threshold. How many are going to get archived? These are the books that are going to get archived. So let's see how that actually happens. I did that. I'm going to hit save so that the parameters get saved into the workbook, and these are the parameters that our script will call.
So basically, Vinod is using a workbook to set all parameters that will be then, what happens in the background is the script that's running goes and fetches this workbook, and all the parameters pushes them to a CSV, which gets picked up, and then executes based on the parameters that are set there, right?
Right. So this is the site we're specifically targeting. All these workbooks that you saw, those 7 or 8 workbooks, live in one of these 4 folders, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's go ahead and execute that script, going into a so-called utility server that hosts this script. And let that run. Retrieving unused workbooks. I don't know if you can see it, it's kind of small on that side. Sandbox workbooks report. All right. Let's go and see what has happened on that server. This was where it was supposed to target. Fingers crossed, something happened. You see that new workbook archive? That wasn't there before. All those workbooks that were defined earlier to be archived got automatically archived into this system. They're still there. The user just doesn't see it. It went into a whole different project. So these are little things that you can implement right away.
That's the script running.
What happened? How do we get to this?
It's all good. Cool. So again, Vinod was leveraging some REST APIs in the background there. Now you could use similar concepts. So the real purpose of that was to clean up all your old content or stuff that is not being used. Again, self-service, people are just publishing. We wanted to allow that. Some people might forget stuff, just like Vinod says, his desktop is full of stuff. We want to clean that up. Now, the similar thing that you could do is also with your extract schedules. Right? I'm not going to be able to show a demo, but what would be great is to be able to leverage your REST APIs to see, well, someone's published, let's say, a workbook, and he saw the every 15-minute schedule, and he's not using it. So it's every 15 minutes. And he didn't do that maliciously. He's like, oh, I have a 15-minute schedule. That looks great. Let me just use that. So what we're saying is, why don't you leverage your repository to get the data out and say, well, you know what? What we're going to do is going to build automatically rescheduling of these schedules based on the actual usage. So since you've only used it once, and that could be an arbitrary number that you pick, the next week, we're going to bump up that schedule to every 1 hour automatically. And if you've still got no usage, the week after, we'll bump it up to the once a day. And this could go on for however much time you want. Ultimately, if there's no usage, that schedule will get turned off. Okay? And I really hope we put this in the product one day. My code, maybe. But really hope we put this in the product one day. But again, it's not in the product, but it doesn't mean we cannot do it, because we can do it with REST APIs. Okay? This one's an interesting one, too. I've heard throughout my 6-year career at Tableau that a lot of customers are like, oh, I'm scared of self-service because people can just publish something on my production server. You're telling me that I should put my Sandbox and my production in the same box, but what if someone publishes something really bad and it's going to take 5 minutes to run, I don't have enough CPU, etc. Well, we can do something similar to those extract schedules too. We can set again, some number, and what we can look for in the repository is all the workbooks that run for a whole week. In a week, the average is over 30 seconds maybe. And we have decided with the council that that's probably, for IT is not good because it's taking a lot of resources. For the business, it's not good because the workbooks are taking a long time anyway. So what we can do is we will send an email out to the owner of that workbook once a week saying, look, your workbook is over 30 seconds. Please do something. We can help. Second week, same thing, another notification. Third week, same thing, another notification. And if it's for 3 weeks in a row that the average is 30 seconds or higher, what we can do to minimize the impact of executing that workbook on the system is we reset the permissions. And we say, you know what, you've had your chance. We gave you a full month to kind of get some help or fix that. We're not going to delete that workbook. We're just going to reset the permissions so that only you can see it. And then you have to action it to fix that maybe. Now, it's not that harsh because as part of that notification process, we will send them back the permissions how they were before. So they can always go back and 5 minutes later and reset those permissions to the original so everybody can see it. But at least we know who is doing that. And it's a bit of a pain for them to do that once a month. Right? This tries to keep the access to slow-running workbooks to a minimum, or at least create a bit of a pain, let's say, to people that don't adhere to those rules. And finally, number 4, what you can do today is make sure you gather your data from your Tableau server. Make sure you monitor and analyze that data. You might have perfmon, you might have tabmon data, you've got all your Postgres repository data, you've got all your logs data, right? And proactively adapt. We're getting into the realm with Tableau Server where you can actually, and I would love to actually create something in the next few months, where we can actually spin up on the fly backgrounders and VisQLs, right? And wouldn't that be great to tie that to your usage and to your schedules that you have and that you predict are coming, so that you can adapt your architecture and your services actually based on real data that you have. Hopefully one day we can actually spin up nodes to add that to your Tableau server. So if there's one thing that you can take away from the monitoring piece is make sure that we tend to kind of install what we call a Tableau utility server, where you can gather data from your repository, use tabmon to monitor all your clusters, use tabjolt to perform any load testing or any upgrade testing that you might want to do, and use logshark to analyze your Tableau logs after the fact to see what's going on. And the great thing about this is that these are all free and available on GitHub. You can just download them and install them. And there's a few sessions during the week that will actually go into the weeds of tabjolt and logshark. Okay? So the takeaway from this piece is make sure you're monitoring and proactively adapting to the usage of your server.
I just can't wait for Emiliano to implement that. That was literally a so-called AI Tableau server that flexes its muscles. You can literally see the VisQL suddenly increase, the backgrounders number and the backgrounders decrease on the fly. Nobody's touching it. I'm pretty much going to lose my job as a professional services consultant to go in there and recalibrate it. But this will literally on the fly based on historical experience, what's coming in, or you can predictively find out what you're expecting to load it. Kind of like the content cleanup workbook where we set parameters on it. Dynamically, it's like you see an equalizer on a stereo, it just keeps going up, it keeps going down, scaling it up and down. So maybe at night when all the jobs are running, it just makes it all backgrounders. And then during the day, it makes it all VisQLs. So Maybe you should patent that idea before Tableau gets its hand on it. But to reiterate, what we were trying to suggest to make it successful, to successfully implement it, we started off with the simple parts of it, the people part, right? Having the governance, having the council, things of that nature. The second piece that you really need to consider is the process. That way everybody knows what they're supposed to do, how to do it, who do they go to, right? And the platform piece, right? How do you clean it up? How is it always made dynamic, right? Nobody actually has to go in there and think about downloading a workbook and then uploading a workbook into another environment or even another site. All you got to do is just type in approve and boom, it's just gone. You made a mistake, go and delete it, it's gone. No 3-day wait for downloading an entire extract, entire workbook, data source, moving it to another server, pulling it back up. That pretty much brings us to the end of our presentation. If you can, take the time to complete the survey on your app, right?
Yes.
Yeah, now it's,
Don't worry.
I was just going to click on the next one. Q&A.
Was a mic coming there?
Yeah.
How you doing?
How you doing?
4 things. Number 1, you're saying you're going to put your Sandbox production server. Isn't that a risky proposition? Because you're saying you're giving read-write to everybody in Sandbox. Couldn't they bring down your entire resources on your production box?
So,
Yeah.
right, I'll yell.
No, I got you.
There's some checks on the Tableau Server anyway, right? So long-running things will not do that to you. We will, with all the stuff that we talked about making that platform stable, we've been checking.
I'm good.
Hello.
1, 2, 1, 2.
No, that's not you.
All right. Oh, sorry. Throughout the 6 years I've been at Tableau, I've never seen that happen, by the way. But I understand it is a concern. Now, with the things that we've talked about on the platform piece, that is exactly to avoid that happening.
Okay.
Right? So we can catch those things and stop them. We actually have REST APIs launched now that you can stop like long-running backgrounders that have kind of spun off on their own, and you can call them with the REST APIs and stop them now.
And where do we get these from? They're not with the package as they're installed, correct?
No, that's correct. So you can leverage the REST APIs, which is a way to interact with the Tableau server through RESTful calls, through requests. That does require some coding, but it is absolutely possible. And that's kind of the message that we're trying to give is, look, even though the platform might not have all these features now as part of the product, doesn't mean you should not be implementing some of these features.
And the person that approves these, the approver, what name did you give him? He's the certifier?
Oh, in this case, it was a project leader.
Okay.
So you can decide that as part of your framework and how you decide that works.
When
Yeah.
this project leader
Yeah.
promotes this package or this workbook
Yes.
from Sandbox to production, he now becomes the owner of the workbook, correct?
Not necessarily, no, because you can script it in a way that there is a service owner. So yeah.
Okay, because if you do it by the GUI, he becomes the owner. So now
Yes.
when you go back to delete him, no longer is the person that made the request to have it being published is no longer the owner.
Right, you're looking at the
No,
lineage.
so what will happen is anything, so the publishing piece, if you think about it, the publisher can always republish on top of that workbook. So if he publishes a new version, it will get flagged, and the person, if you require as part of your framework, needs to reapprove it, he will have to go and reapprove it and it will just sync again.
But when you published it, you did it via the regular publishing mechanism. When you published it to production, the person who does the publishing now becomes the owner.
I didn't publish it to production. I published it to our internal server,
Internal.
and then the script picked it up and moved it to production.
Oh, okay.
Sorry if that wasn't clear.
Okay, great. So then that way, because the delete was going to have a problem working if the owner goes to ask to have his workbook deleted because he's no longer the owner of it, so it wouldn't have that association.
Yeah, so if that was the case, but that's not the case.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I think,
So can we pass around? So yeah, get some other people to have some questions.
Is the script that you showed available online somewhere?
There's some samples. The full script is not available just because it was very specific to a customer we built it for. But it's, some samples will be available. Yeah. Sorry? I don't see who's asking the question, sorry. All right. They'll be available to download from the sessions. Yes.
Quick question on the data dictionary, how you guys implement it and what would be a best practice or quick solutions around that?
On the data dictionary, any specific questions? What's the...
Yeah, I have like 200 columns and about 50 tables around. What would be a best way to create a data dictionary and publish it for a self-service model?
Right. Do you want to...
Yeah. So a data dictionary is actually almost like a process that's governed by people. You don't want to attack that from a technical perspective. You're talking about publishing a data dictionary. I'm talking about creating it. You want to create a data governance board. There will be a data steward who's a subject matter expert for that particular piece of data. Not always the IT guy. The IT guy knows how to build it, but the person who actually uses it to publish content or analyze it for his particular division or department would be a data steward. So he is, you have the requester, certifier, there will be a data steward who will be part of the data governance board, and he kind of approves. Let's say he's from finance, right? Finance metrics will have to go through him to say, from a technical perspective, these are the predefined filters that you need to do to get the nuances of the data, and then when you publish the data source, it has that conformity. It will always conform, right? The certifier will have a checklist looking and seeing, okay, you know what? The subject matter data steward for finance has signed off saying that data, in terms of data, is reconciled. And the data steward will provide data definitions, both technical and business. Technical, he'll say, okay, if this is finance, this is a dollar amount, sales amount, what does it mean as a sales amount? That's actualized sales or projected sales?
From the definition, in terms of choosing or creating that catalog itself within Tableau, you got to go manually to each field and hide the fields. But is there a better process in Tableau?
I guess you could automate that somehow, again, through like the document API. There's a way that you can actually interact with TDSs or data sources and leverage an API to write that and write comments on your columns or descriptions that they show up in a certain way.
We're talking about that one.
And things like that. So we don't have that in the product, but there's ways to kind of go and edit that XML behind the Tableau data source definition. Yeah.
So from sorry, just piggyback a little bit to the question that was
Sure.
asked here. If we're not following that standard IT procedure of having a dev QA, production, actual box, what are the best practices when it comes to upgrading? Because you want to theoretically test out of that environment to make sure nothing breaks once you go into a new cycle.
Upgrading sort of
Server.
The whole-
So from
yeah.
1.5 to 20.
What I've seen customers. Sorry, guys. What I've seen customers do quite a lot is have. So with every Tableau Server license, you get one production and 2 non-productions. I've seen customers roll out, and we've helped customers roll out this model with Sandbox and production on the same box, let's call it, and use a completely separate server, which is their testing server for their upgrades. And that's your non-production box, where I can just take all my content, take a backup, restore it, go through an upgrade, check that everything's validated, and once I'm okay, then I can go upgrade. Does that answer your question?
So I have a question on performance.
Sure.
So I like the idea that we kind of track the average time it spends, and then kind of all those dashboards we kind of move it,
Yeah.
remove the security access to the outside users.
Yeah.
But in reality,
Yeah.
I had the same situation where a business unit is having 4 dashboards, and their average is they have like more than 1.5 minutes and
That's
90
not good,
seconds, right? That's
Yeah.
increasing my average overall the server. If I look at the average usage across the server, it's
Sure.
increasing the average time. Right?
Yes.
Now I had a conversation with that owner, right? And that's a business person, right? And
Yeah.
he's saying, my user is okay with it. I have 50 people looking at it. They don't mind spending 90 seconds.
Sure.
So why don't you do something on your server side? Why are you pulling me into it? And if you want to do some dashboard tuning, then I don't have money to invest in it.
Right.
Can you invest it and tune it? Provided my dashboard doesn't break.
So
What are your
I
recommendations
think that's a really good scenario that you talked about. And I think things like the council, where you do have those business representatives, and you're getting together with other business representatives, and you're saying, look, this is a shared service. Everybody's using this platform. So let's agree on what is a good number that's not going to impact me, IT, and it's not going to impact your users. And that's where I don't have an answer saying, but that's where you can kind of agree and say, look, this is what we've agreed. It's a shared platform. We're going to agree to the rules that we decide in the council. And you can always put exceptions and things like that. But again, you want to get out of the exceptions, because then everybody's going to escalate and get exceptions, and everything's going to be exception. All right? Time for a couple more questions. We'll hang around for a couple more minutes. But yes?
Yeah, just a quick question on the framework that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Sandbox and typically dev test and prod type of activities happening on the same server.
Yeah.
In some cases, especially in the industry that we are at, we have very clear network separation policies.
Yeah, sure.
Where crisscrossing between non-prod and prod environments is a typical no-no.
Yeah.
So what do you see among your clients when they have such requirements, and how they are trying to adopt this framework?
So I think I've seen that absolutely, right? Just requirements to absolutely have to create 3 separate things. I would try. So you can't do the same box, but I would try to leverage all the automation to facilitate that kind of movement, or avoiding the bottlenecks of someone having to take that, download it, move it manually, check it, etc. So leverage at least the REST APIs to facilitate that movement of promotion.
Sure. I mean, that's what we have done. We've
Right.
actually stood up a Python script that
Yep.
automatically takes it from dev, test to prod.
Right.
But I also hear, a lot of, feedback where they say it's kind of over-engineered, and if it can be simplified in some way. We had to adhere to it because of, strict guidelines
Yeah.
on, separation of prod and non-prod.
Right.
So we've done that for our core business areas like risk and clearing analytics. But then for enterprise apps like, let's say HR reporting and stuff like that, we are looking to adopt something similar to what you're proposing there.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Good. Time for maybe one more question? Done? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just be loud. Is Tableau's direction to continue going this route that you guys discovered, or is it planned that, for example, we'll be able to cross servers when it comes to data sources, which would solve a little bit of the bottlenecks?
That's probably a question for one of the dev team. I don't know. I hope so, but yeah, it's probably a question for the dev team. Cool. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. Hopefully, useful
Thank you.
session. Thanks.